I recently viewed Jim Sterling's video discussing DLC practices in big-profile fighting games, titled How Fighting Games Are Carved Up to Extract Your Cash. As an active player, spectator, and short-lived competitor during Street Fighter V Season 2, I felt compelled to present a counter-argument to the points brought forth by Sterling. I'll go over my background in regards to the genre to put my case into perspective as part of the consumer base that does actually purchase, play and discuss fighting games, in contrast to Sterling, who I believe does not play nor discuss fighting games enough to understand the implications of his words in the video in question. For the sake of brevity, I will leave out any fighting games prior to the 7th generation of consoles, during which online play and downloadable content was not commonplace. Additionally, I believe an 11-year time-lapse is more than enough to point out my involvement with fighting games. I was an avid player of Tekken 6 and Tekken Tag 2. I played Soul Calibur 4 and Soul Calibur 5 for hundreds of hours. I played Third Strike on both Fightcade and PlayStation 3. I purchased Injustice for both PlayStation 3 and PC. I bought the Legendary Edition of Injustice 2 for PS4. I have Super Street Fighter 4 on PlayStation 3 and Ultra Street Fighter 4 on PC, and bought Street Fighter 5 on PS4 on day one. Got the first 2 season passes alongside several costumes, and later bought it for PC alongside every season pass on the day of their releases, besides a sizable amount of costumes. I was also a day one player of Dragon Ball FighterZ, and even though I don't play it anymore because I ended up not liking it much, I do have 130 hours on that game. Finally, I own Tekken 7 on PS4 on its deluxe edition and on PC on its regular release, and plan on purchasing the second season pass at a later date. Around half of my subscription inbox on YouTube is related to fighting games, and my visits to Twitch start and end with fighting games. Once Soul Calibur 6 is released, I expect several forgotten and dead channels to come up again in my inbox, adding to the number of fighting game related content I will be consuming. This background check is necessary to understand how Sterling's video was so difficult to watch, as it was a transparent attempt at preaching to the choir, which, sadly, was successful in playing his audience's strings. At the core of the issue with Sterling's presentation is a lack of knowledge of the competitive aspect of fighting games alongside its community and financial stability. A clear absence of empathy towards the value of a developer's work, and no self-awareness of the double standards implied by his arguments. I must first point out that Sterling and I both agree on certain subjects, upon which I will deepen later.
Day 1 DLC and available as part of its cock-damned season pass. The game isn't out yet, but
Any sort of critic who truly plays the games they discuss would have enough footage to interlace with vaguely connected narration for 30 minutes. It is quite clear that Sterling either doesn't care enough about the games he is pointing the finger at to even bother recording his own footage, or, on the other hand, doesn't actually play said games. I know any reputable critic would have their own footage precisely because even I, a not very reputable critic, have my own footage for a very large amount of games that I have analyzed. Whether said recordings were done during the first or subsequent playthroughs is irrelevant to the question at hand. Throughout the whole video, Sterling makes use of B-roll he obviously did not record himself. Excusable when presenting Soul Calibur as an example for his claims, given the game did not release during the creation of his video, but unexcusable when Tekken, Street Fighter and Smash Bros are and have been readily available for years. This is the first sign that Sterling doesn't play, discuss or know much about the fighting game genre as a whole.
gave people ever more shitty things to buy with it in the hopes players would just get impatient.
On his video, Jim Sterling complains that fighting games put characters some people may consider their main behind paywalls to entice the consumer base to pay for season passes. What Sterling fails to understand is that by saying this, he is denying developers the right to profit from the characters they make, even if returning, redesigned or not. And that every fighting game should either come with every legacy character from version 1.0 or add only new, non-main characters to the roster. To Sterling, a paywall for a character from a previous entry of the series is a ransom. Sterling expects developers to release fighting games with 50 different characters and only add fresh new faces to the roster. At no point does Sterling make any mention of having bought Tekken Tag 2, which famously undersold, even though every single DLC character was free, making the game have a total of 53 characters. Additionally, Sterling doesn't mention having purchased Street Fighter V's Season Pass 2 either, a season pass that only added a legacy character and 5 completely new characters: Colin, Ed, Menat, Abigail, and Seku. What's more, Sterling goes over the fact that Tekken 7's Season Pass didn't include Elisa, as she was a pre-order bonus character, but not over the fact that the 2 characters from the Season Pass, Noctis and Geese, were new to Tekken. While I would go on a long-winded rant over the fact that Sterling called Elisa a legacy character simply because she was added to an atrocious free-to-play PlayStation 3 exclusive monstrosity, went on about Tira being a mainstay of the series, but then had the two-faced spirit to call Mewtwo a spotty appearance, I'll keep my composure and simply remember this man is a con artist making a profit from outrage and, even worse, fake outrage. A serious discussion could be started on whether a legacy character in Tekken implies the same value and developer hours as a legacy character in Street Fighter V, but this hypothetical discussion would still understand that a returning Anna and a returning Lei Wulong were not merely materialized out of thin air. Both characters and the incoming characters of Tekken 7's Season Pass 2 required rebalancing and restructuring to fit the confines of Tekken 7's particular system. Anyone familiar with Street Fighter immediately understands that a returning character doesn't translate into a returning main. While many players have an attachment to the characters they play that goes further than their pure functionality as tools, the very core of their character choice lies on their fighting capabilities. Bison in Street Fighter 4 and Bison in Street Fighter 5 are not the same character. Bison, Akuma, Nash, Cody, Sakura, Yuri, and Ibuki, among others, are not returning characters within the systems of Street Fighter, even if the visual designs and names remain the same. Some of those named characters are strikingly different in terms of gameplay when comparing them between, for example, Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5. Sterling is oblivious to the fact that a player being denied their main character is a simple downside we'll have to live with when entering fighting games. While some of us are lucky and play a character that is guaranteed in every entry of the series due to its gigantic popularity, like Brian in Tekken or Nightmare in Soul Calibur, some of also us played Doomsday and currently play Darkseid. One character not having returned and the second one having very little chances of appearing in a hypothetical Injustice 3. I'll go as far as to say that Bison is possibly not coming back for Street Fighter 6, and, if he is, Capcom could easily make his gameplay based around his Street Fighter 2 incarnation, leaving me without a main. I must ask Jim Sterling what his view is on Julia in Tekken. Should she have been in the roster since the beginning? Should she never be added to Tekken 7? What do Julia players do? Should they not pay for her if she is announced? Should Tekken 7 have launched with 55 characters even though Tekken Tag 2 undersold? Did you buy Tekken 7? Did you buy Street Fighter 5? Did you buy Injustice 2? Do you actually play any of those games, Jim? But I'll be more precise and talk about Tira, as her case is the one mentioned in the video. Should Soul Calibur 6 launch with as many characters as Soul Calibur 5, even though Soul Calibur 5 almost killed the franchise due to sales? Did you, Jim, actually buy Soul Calibur 5? I know I did, Jim, but I do not remember you complaining about the whole restructuring the series went through during that entry, with gutted movesets and modified notations that made many people's mains undesirable to play. Is what Soul Calibur 5 did okay in your eyes, Jim? Redesigning characters, giving them new names, removing moves, and introducing an EX bar. Is Natsu okay, Jim? Or should she have remained Taki? To end this point of my counter-argumentation, I must say I agree with Jim Sterling's view on the grid shown by Namco, as the game did not even have a finalized roster when the company announced a season pass. Bonus characters are truly a problem too, as it puts a particular stress on the player to pre-order a title that might not be what they expect. I know this well, as just last year I decided to pre-order Injustice 2 to have instant access to Darkseid. Well, that purchase was one I never regretted, as I was confident on having that game on day one. The pressure of pre-ordering to save some money on a character was unwelcome. I say this as someone who has pre-ordered fighting games and will continue to do so to be able to compete from the very start. Pre-order bonuses, funnily enough, benefit me in that regard, but I still see them as an unnecessary evil. Finally, I also agree on what he said about Harada not actually having much of a say on what is a DLC and what isn't a DLC. This is the point of the video in which Sterling makes it quite obvious he doesn't actually play fighting games. His hostage analogy remains the same while complaining about Tekken's second season pass. A season pass which includes, as of the 30th of September that I write, 2 legacy characters, Anna and Lei. Sterling talks about splitting the community while hopefully ignorant and not willfully misleading, leaving out the fact that Tekken 7 and Street Fighter 5 went out of their way to not divide the community. If Sterling played any of these games, he would have added to his speech that a costumer doesn't actually have to buy the season passes to have access to the season updates. The added cost is for the characters only. Sterling is showing he doesn't have the best memory, as he didn't point out that this state of affairs is an advancement to what we had before. While games like Street Fighter 4 required the player to buy each subsequent entry to even have a go at competition, a Street Fighter 5 costumer that bought the game back in 2016 can still, to this day, use that same copy of Street Fighter 5 without having to spend a single cent more. The addition of season passes, while not a cure for the added characters' dilemma, is what has allowed Tekken 7 and Street Fighter 5, among others, to be able to keep the community playing the same game on the same online. Sterling, in his ignorance of the matter of fighting games, did not mention Guilty Gear, a series that actually splits its community through the use of old update paths that forces players to not only buy the update to be able to play on the latest version, but also buy additional characters on top of that in some instances. Of course, this is not meant as an attack on Guilty Gear, but to point out the failure of sight in Sterling's aim. Of all the things Tekken 7 and Street Fighter 5 can be damned, splitting their player base is not one of them. Of course, once Sterling points out the fact that Capcom chains fight money earnings in Street Fighter 5, he becomes vague and unprecise, cementing the fact that he doesn't play the game and is speaking from what he has heard through the game's life. First, I'll point out that, indeed, Street Fighter 5 Arcade Edition killed fight money earnings to the point that FM gains are laughable. But we need to understand the reasoning behind this, as Jim Sterling doesn't know why this happened, nor did he care enough to be a proper critic and do proper research. Before 2018's Arcade Edition update, Street Fighter 5 used to give fight money as a reward for completing survival mode. There were a total of 4 fight money rewards per character. 1 for easy, 1 for normal, 1 for difficult, and 1 for hell. Multiply that, then, by the number of characters you would have had back then. I will not go into detail on the very easy exploits that would have landed a player literal millions of fight money, as anybody who would have done it would have indeed done it by December 2017, as Capcom was clear as day for over a month that survival mode would no longer give fight money. But I'll say that trainers used with some thought gave many players every character in the game for free. All of this meant that Capcom was faced with giving every character from Season 3 for free, as anybody with a functioning brain would get every character on the day of their release, making Season 3 a complete financial failure. Again, Jim Sterling's argumentation is simply crying for free characters free updates, free stages, and free costumes for years after the game released. In other words, Jim Sterling feels he is entitled to every piece of content released after 2016's Street Fighter V launch. As someone who actually played Street Fighter V since 2016 on PlayStation 4 and 2017 on PC and did around 12 Hell survival runs, 24 hard survival runs, and every single easy and normal run, I had actual millions of fight money just from survival mode. And I am not even counting shared accounts on Family Share on Steam. To that amount had to be added the rewards from General Story Mode on both normal and hard for a total of 100k or a full character unlock, rewards for demonstrations and rewards for challenges. Suffice it to say, Sterling's ignorance is showing, as anybody who played Street Fighter V before would have such a disproportionate amount of in-game cash that buying anything wouldn't be an issue by 2017. Again, I would know as I'm still running more than 300k fight money for the Fighting Chance minigame, and this is in an account with only 300 ranked matches, which is the only online mode that actually gives fight money. Had my 10,000 total games on Steam been on ranked mode, that amount would be ridiculous. This portion of the video is a clear call for his audience's already established negative opinions on DLC. Let's first finish with the season passes, as they are not the problem fighting games should be pointed at for. Without season passes, a developer has to rely on base game sales to keep support for a title. A fighting game requires long-term support to remain both relevant and competitive. Street Fighter V and Tekken 7 would not have had their free balance updates, which improved both games, had there not been season passes which with to make a profit. Fighting games that are not Smash Brothers do not sell enough millions to justify keeping updates throughout years. It doesn't matter how much of a wet dream it is to think of a world in which Capcom and Bandai gift players free characters. The reality is that a human being who needs food on the table is actually making those games. Sterling wants fighting games with 55 character rosters, free updates and free added characters later down the line. As Sterling complains about the cosmetic DLCs listed in the Street Fighter V store, he also forgets to point out that the Steam list isn't even the full one. I should point out, yet again, that all of these listings are cosmetic items that do not alter the game in any way, shape or form. I must also point out that these packs, while roughly priced, are meant to add to the Capcom Pro Tour price and are not required to play the game. I must also remind everyone that to play a fully updated version of Street Fighter V, a hypothetical buyer could simply buy the original release of Street Fighter V and let the game update for free. But, then again, Sterling wants to put in his old Street Fighter V disc, considering the hypothesis that he actually has it as positive, have every character released since 2016, which means a total of 18 characters, every stage, every costume, every title, every cut, and every update running for more than 2 years for free at the original buy-in price of $60 back in 2016 for the vanilla version. Up to this point, Jim Sterling has done nothing but complain that fighting game developers aren't giving him everything for free, even though he doesn't even play a single one of the games he mentioned. For all the goods he believes himself entitled to without having to put any additional money, one would think he makes video critiques for free, like I am doing just now. But no, he is comfortably sitting at $13k in donations to complain that Capcom doesn't give him Sakura for free. This man is complaining about people making a living while he is making a living only the Luxembourgish can compete with. But I know what's coming now. Oh Luis, his videos are free, and indeed they are, just like the balance patches for the characters we already own. I will quickly mention his chess analogy. No Jim, fighting games and chess. Chess doesn't get updated. Fighting games do actually get updated. I'll reserve judgment on Cross-Tag Battle, as I never cared for the game, nor will I ever care. I'll additionally reserve my judgment on what counts as good DLC, as it would have been a waste of time trying to explain why Guile, Balrog, Yuri, Akuma, Sakura and Sagat, the ones that come to mind immediately, are purchases I'm very happy with, to someone who praised Bayonetta's DLC without making a single mention of what that character did for Smash 4 as a whole. By this point in the video, Sterling is going for the bottom of the barrel, complaining about easy fatalities which are not needed in any way, shape or form, but continues by saying that these DLC practices make people angry. This is, yet again, more proof that Jim Sterling doesn't play fighting games, doesn't spectate fighting games, and doesn't care about fighting games. Not only are updates and season passes looked forward to by the actually fighting game playing community, but the very irrelevant costumes that are only there to make a profit make people happy too.
Y'all ready for it? Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Woo! Oh, shit! Oh, shit! There it is. You can see Joe and them excited as shit, hugging all up. Oh my God. Let's go, ladies and gentlemen. Evo 2018. Oh! Oh, damn! Yeah! Yeah!
The only people that complain about fighting game DLC are the people who don't play fighting games. Anybody actually in the fighting game community would know that whenever a Menat costume is announced, everybody loses their mind asking for more. But of course, Jim Sterling doesn't know this. The point of this video is to reach the ears of Jim Sterling's audience, to give them a view of a fighting game player, someone who looks forward to and knows about the games he plays for thousands upon thousands of hours. I was once one of you. I used to believe that fighting games should simply give everything for free without even considering the economical viability of what I was thinking. As a teenager who could not afford much, any other DLC cost during the early days of the PlayStation 3 were tough to swallow. However, seeing the community remain under one consistent version of the game that is given for free to everybody, knowing the developers are actively keeping track of the competitive scene, which is, do not forget for a second, the people who actually play these games and support them years down the line, and making sure balance is kept throughout the life of the title, and having new content being developed constantly makes any downsides brought forth by Jim Sterling minute. Now that I've gone over how Jim Sterling is talking to an echo chamber, I'll go over the real problems those same fighting game players have pointed out face every day. Let's go over the smaller issues first, in other words, the ones that don't actually affect gameplay. Seasonal costumes have been quite successful for Capcom, and as such have become a mainstay for Street Fighter V. These seasonal costumes, since 2017, were bundled to entice players to purchase more costumes at a reduced price. However, this price is not reduced if the player has any of the costumes listed within the bundle. This puts players into the small issue of either buying every costume at the big price and take the bullet now, or purchase any given costume knowing buying any additional costume of that bundle will add up to an even bigger price later down the line. This problem is made even more pronounced once we know that Capcom delists some costumes. While I do have the 2016 Halloween bundle, the individual costumes are not listed to buy separately, meaning that a player wanting to buy a costume at a reduced price, since all costumes go for less than newly released ones, cannot actually do it. They have to buy the whole bundle. At a discount, which is how I bought the package, these bundles are legitimately good value, as they go for roughly 1 or 2 costume price for around 4 or 5 total final costumes. Discounts, however, are not something a customer can rely on. To add insult to injury, the Capcom Pro 2 packs not only carry quite ridiculous prices for the amount of stuff they offer, as they are supposedly meant for prize money, but they lock cosmetics behind the full price of the package a year down the line like the other bundles. Every CPT pack offered a total of 3 costumes. On 2016, it was Nekali, Chun-Li and Kami. On 2017, for Guile, Ryu and Ken. And on 2018, for Birdie, Sakura and Akuma. One of the costumes is designed by the winner of Capcom Cup. Kazunoko designed Nekali's outfit, Knuckle-Doo designed Guile's, and Mena RD designed Birdie's. All of the 3 costumes carry an additional premium cost special to themselves. Instead of running for $3.99, CPT costumes are $5.99. So not only is the player put under pressure to buy the costumes before paying the exorbitant price of the package 1 year later, but they are pressured to buy specially expensive costumes. Now, I must say that $5.99 is a price I am willing to pay and have, in fact, paid for Guile's CPT costume, but since I started playing Ken and Ryu some time ago, I find myself in the unfortunate situation of wanting both their CPT costumes, but I can only acquire them by buying the €24 package, a package that isn't discounted even though I already bought the $5.99 Guile costume. However, the 2016 summer costumes are still listed on the in-game store and have been there for 2 years already. Almost every Chun-Li costume is readily available and not under a time limit, and Karin's Ingrid cosplay is also listed without a time limit, even though Urien's Jill costume is a limited Halloween offer within a bundle. No logic behind this other than female characters' costumes sell well, so Capcom gives the rest of us the middle finger for not paying as much. The following problem is a real issue that new players have faced and will have to face for the foreseeable future that Jim Sterling had no idea about. The removal of survival fight money rewards came as a result of Capcom realizing that the launch of the Character Pass 3 was at jeopardy, as any player willing to do enough survival runs or simply use a trainer without Capcom really noticing it could unlock every single character to be released during Season 3 for free, damaging Capcom's profit profoundly. While I understand their stance, Capcom's solution damaged their game more than it helped, as fight money gains are at an all-time low, putting big pressure on new players to buy the Season Pass. This was mitigated with the release of Street Fighter V Arcade Edition, which came with the first 2 Season Passes for a total of 12 additional characters, all of those with their respective battle costumes. Where Capcom was especially nasty and Jim Sterling didn't point out, again because he doesn't actually know what he was talking about, was with their marketing for Arcade Edition. On purchase of the listing Street Fighter V Arcade Edition, new players back in January were welcomed by an in-game cinematic prominently showcasing Season 3 characters, which were not added in this version of the game. Capcom knew very well the disgusting game they were playing and went as far as to make Sakura completely free for around 2 weeks. It is quite obvious Capcom was abusing the fact that some players didn't exactly know what they were buying by having one of the characters recently released falsely available to everyone for free for a very short period of time. Of course, this meant that many players who thought they had Sakura in their arcade edition purchase woke up to the ugly surprise that they had to fork for the price of the character, €6, or the season pass, with very few of these players knowing the exact fight money pass-through to buy said character and only said character. While a consumer needs to make proper research onto the goods they are buying, the case of Street Fighter V Arcade Edition is a clear example of publisher greed. The final and most egregious problem that affects almost every fighting game following the character pass model is the one that will hopefully be fixed in future fighting game entries. While a player is not forced to pay for a character they don't play, said player needs to be able to practice against said character. Jim Sterling points out the fact that mains of a DLC character have to pay a premium, but he did not point out the actual problem. Everybody who wants to be able to have a proper competitive chance against a DLC character needs said character for training mode purposes. Street Fighter V, Tekken 7 and Dragon Ball FighterZ lock on purchased characters from being playable in training mode. This is the single biggest atrocity that came from the era of character passes and not what Sterling talked about. We have to look at Tekken 7 for the most damaging example of the bunch. Any new player to Tekken 7 has already had to face several Annas and Leis online, and the issues are clear as day. They can't simply practice against their strings and gimmicks without a training partner willing to spend their time teaching a character or put up the money and buy the DLC. Within my group of friends who play fighting games, 2 are completely new to Tekken 7 and one of them was only a casual player back in Tekken Tag 2. I have been playing Tekken since Tekken 3, so Anna and Lei are new territory for me. I would benefit from having them unlocked, but in my case, ranked mode is enough practice. These friends, however, are having gigantic trouble fighting the newly added legacy characters. This is not acceptable, especially when Killer Instinct, a game released back in 2013, allows players to access training mode with non-purchased characters. This situation makes the Season Pass go from an additional price a competitor is willing to pay to keep a game they are interested in alive for longer into a must-buy for any player even considering being relevant at the local level. On top of that, Season Passes are especially damaging to new players who do not know the legacy characters. For now, this is everything I had to say. My desire is to offer the perspective of an insider and leave any preconceptions a foreigner to fighting games might have. Jim Sterling's video was particularly painful to watch, precisely due to how obvious it is he bases his whole arguments on what he has heard and read, and not on actual experience. There have been many video discussions pointing out flaws with the business practices of current fighting games which were flawed themselves. But these come from real players and real consumers, not con artists making thousands of dollars a month complaining other people want to make thousands of dollars a month. With this, I hope everybody with the smallest interest in fighting games gets a proper picture of the situation to make their own decisions on whether it's worth the money or not. That was all. See you next time.
Además es que has visto el puto paso lateral, cabrón.
Sí, ya lo. Sí me. O sea, he flipado.